So this topic is near and dear to my heart because, like Erin said, I am a busy mama. I am an elementary school counselor. I'm an LPC candidate, so I'm working towards being a fully licensed therapist. So I teach on the side. I teach parenting groups and anger management groups through Improving Lives counseling services. And then I also teach parenting workshops and divorce workshops for parents going through divorce with minor children for family and children services. And then I always love working with Erin. To me, anything that provides a practical connection to resources and support, I'm all about practical. I don't want to talk theory. And even though I'm a complete and total nerd, I'm kind of what I call a boots on the ground girl. So, what do we need to do that's going to really practically help us in our lives, in our day in and day out lives? So, I was just brainstorming while she was doing the yoga and doing that on Thursdays at noon. I have an inkling I might need to be starting my fourth grade girls group to be at lunch at 12 o'clock. I have some very high strung fourth grade girls. I think we could all uh, benefit from a little yoga. Now, there are a lot of times too, it's not, I love how we were talking about, different practices, staying hydrated, working in mindfulness. These patterns, these day in and day out habits make a huge difference. Also, our mindset makes a huge difference. What are we focusing our time and energy on? And that's what tonight is about is, what's in your circle? We're going to talk this idea of um, your circle of control. How can we make adjustments as we are learning to reshift where we are putting our focus? Mindful moments. We just got a crash course in that, and the most relaxing crash course I've ever taken. So that kind of is what's ahead. Um, what is in your circle? So this question I ask you is I want you to take a minute to write down yourself or to think or to send in the chat section. What are some of the different things that you worry about or you get stressed out about in your life? All of us have different things. Some of us are caregivers for family members with special needs. Some of us have young children. Some of us have are empty nesters. Some of us have stressful jobs or a lot of things on our plate. What are some of the things that you stress or worry about? So I want you to just take a minute to think about that. Write it down. And I'd also love you to send it in the chat section. Um, because sometimes it helps to know that we're not the only person who has these worries and these concerns. Feel free to share that with me. That really did feel so good. I loved that. All right, as you're thinking about those things, I know when I write stuff down, I think about my middle school age daughter. She's having some friendship problems right now. That's something that is of concern to me. Money and budgeting and upcoming trips, if we're going to be able to take any. I think about my health, and I think about the upcoming presidential election. I think about I'm in education, so I live in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma isn't always the most education legislation friendly state. So there's a lot of different things. I feel responsibility towards my teachers at school. I have 10 third grade and 10 fourth grade teachers, plus a whole bunch of staff and almost 600 students between third and fourth grade at Jenks East Elementary that I'm over. I think of my assistant principal and my site principal and my other counselors and how can we collaborate and share the load? There's a lot of different moving parts on my plate. So these are just the things in our lives that stress us out. So does anyone feel like sharing some of the things that they wrote down that they worry about or they stress about or that are have an impact on their day? And if it's easier to just pop on your microphone, you are more than welcome to do that as well. Things that you worry about. Ooh, I have something in the chat section. Ooh, teenager school navigation, right there with you. Middle son's emotions. What is it about middle sons? I have one of those, and he struggled the most with his emotions. Youngest son's enrichment needs, helping the kids discover their own strengths. And that's a tough one too, because We want their futures to be bright. We want their futures, them to have happiness and to survive and thrive, but without me deciding for them. What are their strengths and how can we tap into that? Creating family fun times, husband relationship, personal physical health, personal mental health, self-growth and expansion, my work performance, my volunteer life, making positive friendships. Those are just to name a few. Um, we have a lot that boils around in our mind. And with every thought, thoughts create these feelings that we have. And every feeling has what's called a corresponding neurochemical cocktail, which is whatever neurochemicals we have going around there create a feeling of sadness, create a feeling of joy, create a feeling of fear and anxiety, create a feeling of, anticipation. There's so many different emotions that we can have. And what we focus on definitely can have an impact on that. So I really liked in our yoga practice that we did, just having those positive affirmations and what we're focusing on. We really truly can have the best day ever, depending on what we're focusing on. That's what this is about. So in this circle of control, this is Stephen Covey wrote a wonderful book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And at our school and a lot of schools around the nation, there's something called the Leader in Me curriculum. So I'm going to put that in the chat section because it's a great one for kids too. Leader in Me curriculum. They have books that go with that, or the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so in the 7 Habits of Highly, I can't type under pressure. In the 7 Habits, he talks about your locus of control. Where are you spending your time? Because we will give away a lot of our joy and energy and waste a lot of emotion depending on what we're focusing on. So the circle of concern, which is this outside gray circle area, this is the circle where you have no control. The things in this circle definitely have an impact on you. So it's not to say that they aren't concerns, that I have no control. I have no ability to change the things that are in this gray circle area. Whatever circumstances, issues, problems that we have no control over. The circle of influence, which is this inner blue circle, this includes all the circumstances, issues, or problems that I don't have direct control over, but I do have some influence. So, even when I'm working with classroom teachers, they don't have control over a child's behavior, but they have some influence. If they have some good classroom management techniques and some good systems and preventive and responsive strategies, it can influence someone's behavior. I don't have control over someone's attitude, or, one of you mentioned my relationship with my husband. I don't have control over his feelings about me, but my behaviors, my communication, my actions can have some influence on those feelings and influence the quality of our relationship while I can't fully control that. So that's my circle of influence. And then we have our circle of control. These are those things that we actually do have direct control over. So here are some examples. All right. So as we're looking in this gray circle, things that impact my life, but I have zero control over. The weather. Welcome to Oklahoma. I can't believe tomorrow it says it might be 79 degrees. This is crazy. My past decisions, choices, and behavior. I literally cannot change the past. We don't have to worry about public transportation in Tulsa. It's never on time. My son lives in Boston, so that's an issue. The outcome of a court case, a sports match, the media being made redundant, a celebrity's behavior or opinion, strangers' comments on forums or social media, cyber threats, other people's behavior or driving habits, the economy, the prices, inflation, traffic, where I was born, if there is a death in the family or with someone that I know, government policies. Now, some of these things I could have influence on depending on how involved I am in politics, but the outcome of the presidential election, I have a little tiny bit of influence on that. The threat of war, this is something newer that we have two major conflicts going on right now, with between Russia and Ukraine and between Israel and on the Gaza Strip. So, these are these are relatively recent developments. World peace, all of these things, zero control over, but they do have an impact on my life for sure. All right. Now, the blue circle, here are some examples of things that I don't have control over, but I do have influence over. People's actions. Again, I can't control what they do, but there are things I can do that can have an influence on their actions. I can set healthy boundaries, which can limit some of the negative things actions they have on me. I can have some safety things in place if it's going to help keep me safe in my own home and locking doors and things like that. Other people's choices. I share with you, one of you is concerned about a teenager navigating middle school. I can't control my daughter's choices that she's doing in seventh grade. I can have some influence over them on what we talk about. And, as she's having different struggles or frustrations, how we support each other and problem solve through those things together. Ultimately, she has to do the things, but I can definitely have some influence on that. My productivity at work. And this is where my brain works against me. I have ADHD, so productivity and ADHD are not friends, but creativity and ADHD are great buddies. It just doesn't always happen to work out with paperwork. So, but there are systems I can have in place. Do I keep a list? Do I put things on my calendar so I'll remember? Those kinds of things can help my productivity. Whether or not people like me, I can't control that, but I can definitely have an influence on that. If I run around and I'm rude and not very thoughtful and not very helpful, that's gonna, make people not necessarily like me as much. Also, if I'm kind and thoughtful and helpful, within healthy boundaries, that can definitely have an influence. My children's future. Ooh, and that one's so hard because we love them so much. I have three older sons. They're 22, 25, and 27. And watching them navigate their own choices, watching them make huge decisions. I know my middle son, he had always thought he was going to be a doctor. I am going to be a doctor. He went to college and did his pre-med and neuroscience major. He took that MCAT, didn't do so great. Took the MCAT again, didn't do so great. Studied, I'm talking 13, 14 hours a day. And all along, I'm thinking, I know you want to be a doctor, but are you sure? What do you actually want to do? You know what he loves? He loves research. He loves teaching, like at the college level kind of stuff. He wants to rewrite public policy and have a lot of impact on public health policy and mental health, public health policy. But he doesn't need to go to med school for that. But I couldn't tell him that. He had to figure that out. And he decided, you know what? I don't want to go to medical school. I don't need to give away 10 years of my life to do what I actually want to do. So he's chosen to do a PhD program. I can't control that for him. And it was hard for me to watch him suffer. Um, and not to say that we should avoid doing hard things, but just completely demoralizing, unmanageable toxic stress and worried about what was that going to be like for 10 years. So, we can't control their future. Where I work, I have some influence on that on where I choose to apply. And I'm finally back home at Jenks East Elementary. Absolutely love it there. Who I vote for. I have some influence on that, but if the person that I want to vote for doesn't even make it on the presidential ballot, I don't have full control over that. How much my partner loves me, the certain things we do to contribute to the quality of our relationship. I have some influence. My reputation, whether or not I get promoted, who follows me on social media, my commitments, and I know a lot of us have overcommit ourselves sometimes, and other people's thoughts. I can't control this. I do have some influence on it though, but I can't control it. And then what can I actually control? My thoughts, my words, my actions and behavior, my reactions, my decisions and choices, my attitude and my mindset, my mood, my work ethic. These are all things that me personally, I have direct influence over. So now look back at the list of things that you wrote down or what you thought about and think, where does that fit in the circle? Does that thing that I'm worried about my child's future, does that fit in? Where does that fit in here? The navigating middle school, where does that fit in here? Is that a circle of concern? I have no control over it. Is that the blue circle of influence, or is that white circle of control? I actually have control over that. So kind of visualize that. Where does that go? And I want you to think, where are you spending your time? Is it actually in your circle of control or influence? Or is it way out here? Circle of concern. What do you think? Let's talk about it. Of your list of things, what, where does it fall? The things that you are spending a lot of time thinking about, the things that you are spending a lot of time stressing about, where does it fall in these circles? Anyone want to share?
I would say too many are in the circle of concern.
The things that are completely out of your control. Yep. Now, I am not saying by, oh, don't have any control over it, just forget about it. It's not to deny the impact that those things have. Education legislation has a massive impact on me. A lot of the social emotional legislation trends that are going on right now have a direct impact on my job as a school counselor, but I can't change that. So, what am I going to be spending time talking about? I call this the teacher's lounge syndrome. Do we sit in the teacher's lounge and parents today and this and that and that? We can't control that. But if that's all we're talking about, we're staying frustrated and helpless and hopeless for sure. Let's stay out of the what if and okay, just right here, right now, what can I do? What can I not do? Because we can spiral. Well, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And what if this happens in those areas that we don't have control over? And so, as far as our brain is considered, if we're thinking, what if, our brain reacts as if it's actually happening. So our brain is releasing adrenaline, our brain is releasing cortisol. And if we don't have good systems in our life to release those, really, really powerful neurochemicals, then that's what's creating a tension. That's what's making our neck sore. That's what's making us feel anxious and uptight and our stomach hurt and having a hard time sleeping because we don't have an outlet for that, but also we're focusing on things that we can't control. And boy, I will tell you, being a parent, it's a gradual process of realizing how little we do have control over um, in that, especially when it comes to our kids once they leave. And that's where that big tension happens between our young adult children and us when we still want to. And it's like, it's no longer my business. It's hard because it's not coming from a place of meanness. It's coming from a place of love, but it's love that's focusing on the wrong thing. We have a comment too. Well said, especially like is there anything you can do? Then do that and don't worry about the rest. So, Charlotte, you got kudos on your sharing. And that's wisdom. That's
Thank you.
wisdom. Anyone else want to share? Where do you seem to be spending the most time? Okay. And you're always welcome to send something in the chat section. So, what do we do? When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So, there was a book I read that just blew me away when I went through a really difficult time in my life. And it involved really having to forgive someone that I could not control their actions. And it was driving me crazy. So I read this book, What's So Amazing About Grace, that basically lined up a system of grace, which is I'm going to let go and choose to not pay people back in the way that they've treated me, or a system of justice. You did this, you get this back, whatever cycle we're in. And in it, there were so many stories of Holocaust survivors and two people who would survive a Holocaust camp, the most horrible, horrible experience. One would go on to lead a beautiful, productive, rich, loving life, and the other would go on to lead a very shallow, bitter life. And both, understandably, had experienced horrific, horrific things. It was what they chose to do. All right, I can't control these things that happened to me. I can't control the horrible policies that were in place that allowed these things to happen to me. I can't control if my abusers are ever sorry. However, where am I going to focus? And so what they found is people who focused on things that were no longer in their control and like they were waiting on that to happen in order to move forward, they stayed stuck. And that's that tricky situation. If we can't change the situation, we can challenge to change ourselves. So we can make adjustments. Here are some ideas. If we focus, here's the reality. If we focus on all of our concerns, in that circle of concern, which we have no control over, we literally feel out of control and helpless. If that's where we put our time and our energy, we then we feel out of control and helpless. Now, if we put our time and our energy into our circle of influence, like how can I influence, my effective communication so I connect better with my daughter or my family members? How can I influence my health by getting some systems in place that will be helpful for stress relief and for, longevity and my joints working and all those kinds of things. If I put my energy into my circle of influence or circle of control, I actually feel more empowered and energized and peaceful. It's where I'm placing my focus. It's my mindset. When we can't change our circumstances, just like you were saying, Charlotte, what if you're worried about it and you can't change it? I'm not going to invest my time and energy in that anymore. Um, Even with the things we can't change, we actually still can make adjustments that bring peace. Even in chaos, what we choose to focus on, how we choose to manage that stress, where we choose to empower ourselves, we actually can make adjustments that bring peace. So I'm going to give the name of this one app. I'm going to put it in the chat section. So this app is called Spiral Up Light. It's so good. Oops, I don't know why that just went on caps lock. Okay, sorry. Spiral Up Light. They have a Spiral Up that is like a subscription thing, but you don't have to worry about that. Spiral Up Light, and it uses EBT techniques. EBT is emotional brain training, which you can learn about. Goodness gracious, I cannot type under pressure. Um, um, I am misspelling everything left and right. See, my fingers are too relaxed from yoga, which is like ebt.org. Okay, so this Spiral Up app, it actually, when you are starting to feel overwhelmed, you can click on it. It starts off like with a little triangle, and it starts to cycle you through the emotions and brings you to an empowering statement. So it starts off, what are you upset about? What are you complaining about? Then it starts cycling through the feelings. I feel angry that. I feel I'm so mad about this. I feel guilty about this. I feel sad that. Now I feel grateful that. I feel hopeful that. I feel, a statement I can make to myself. I have the power to do what? And literally, the prompts that are in the app cycle you through and allow you to feel the feelings, but it doesn't keep you there. It cycles you into then being able to make an empowered statement, and you're actually feeling much lighter and you're feeling more empowered. Because even in the craziest of situations, there is still something that you can do that you have some control over. But they have been doing, it's very well researched, 40 years of research behind EBT techniques. But that Spiral Up Light app, they're using it a lot with, they're even doing some pilot research with middle schoolers that, hey, if you can do 5 spiral up sessions a day, they kind of have this little point system. It almost can make it like a game. The peace of mind, the literal brain changes that are happening, are pretty impressive. And that's a great way of allowing you to shift your focus by cycling through what I'm complaining about and bringing me to a statement of what do I actually have control over. Make adjustments where they count. Simple, small changes, not like our New Year's resolutions are going to change everything and the house is going to be perfect. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But little major changes, minor changes become major changes and change our attitude towards the problems that we have no control over. Just like you said, Charlotte, what I'm worrying about that I have no control over, I'm just going to change my attitude about that. I can't waste my worry on that. Learning to accept problems and live with them, even if we don't like them. And that's hard because it's not fair. And that's okay. There's so many things in life that just aren't fair, but it is what it is. So we make the changes where we can, we advocate for what we can advocate for, and then we accommodate for what we can't. It's not fair, but it is what it is. And I know that once I start having those kinds of thoughts in my head, well, that's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair, I stay stuck. Because what's not fair, that's out of my control. But how can I make it more fair? How can I advocate for myself? How can I put some healthy boundaries in place that can limit the impact of the things that aren't fair? There's a lot of things that we still can do, even in systems that might be working against us. And sometimes we work really hard to change that system, and that's okay too. So, how do I take charge? Practical little things. Well, lovely Tammy just gave us a great example of the mindfulness piece. Um, Building in some of those daily practices. Mindfulness is like exercise for your brain. So I've shared this in other sessions, so you might have heard this before if you've been to any of my other sessions. But we get when Tammy talked about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. The parasympathetic system in our body, nervous system in our body, is our relaxation response. It's where we get feelings of well-being and calm and joy and peace. Our sympathetic nervous system is also very important. It's the reactive nervous system. You know what's natural? Sympathetic. The brain is always looking for ways, our next threats. Unless we train it to, yes, I can acknowledge the threat, but I can also simultaneously activate my parasympathetic nervous system. And we do that through mindfulness techniques. So when I was a single mom for about 5 years, and they had this thing came in my son's backpack from school that you could earn money at Laureate Institute for Brain Research by participating in their research studies. So I'm like, we need money. The boys could even do it. So they wanted money. So like, sure, well, I'll do it. It involved filling out paperwork and then also doing some things in the MRI machine depending on what study they were doing. So apparently I'm really good in an MRI machine. They asked me to volunteer for random electric shocks study. And I'm like, nope, that's going to be a big no for me. Sorry, you can't pay me enough for that. But one of the studies that I volunteered in, it was a mindfulness study, and they were actually calculating the blood flow to parts of the brain when you are focusing on happy memories, doing some mindful practices. So it had us list our most intense happy memories. And then when you were in the MRI machine, it was actually in real time measuring the blood flow to the part of the brain that they were targeting that was correlated with um, calm and peace and contentment. And your goal was to raise the bar, which meant increase the blood flow. So the way we did that is we would intensely focus on these happy memories. What was it like? What did it smell like? What were some of the sounds we remember in the room? Like a really good visual image. And at that time, some of my super, super happy, intense memories, they were from like 8 and 9 years prior. I didn't have any intensely happy memories within the previous 5 years, not a single one. I'd had some happiness, but not really, really joyful. And so some of them I had to go back to when the boys were little, like when they first learned to walk and just some of those things, because it was a really, really intense time. So I would focus really hard on those memories. I'd raise that bar and that blood flow was going. And then at the end of the study, I went into that study depressed and I left the study no longer depressed. Every single logistical situation in my life was still exactly the same stressors, the same, co-parenting frustrations, all the things were still the same. But I had finally gotten some blood flow to a part of my brain that just wasn't even getting used because I wasn't using my parasympathetic nervous system. I was stuck in my sympathetic nervous system. I was stuck. And so exercises, mindfulness exercises, even ones about peace and joy, letting go of negative thoughts. And I'll send a bunch of different links. And I really do also think that even signing up for that lunchtime yoga on Thursdays is something I'm going to do. Now that I experienced it, I know it's always been there, but now I experienced it. I'm like, ooh, I think I would like that. Little simple things like that. That is a way of feeling empowered and getting peace and calm and managing our very real stress. Another one is changing expectations. Expectations are directly linked to your feelings of happiness. If we have realistic expectations, then we typically have more opportunities to feel happy because these are realistic, they can be met. If we have unrealistic expectations, like the house is going to be perfect, that I am never going to lose my temper, that my children are never going to make a mistake, that whatever our unrealistic expectations are, if those expectations aren't met, even though they're not realistic and pretty much impossible, even that, if they're not met, we genuinely feel unhappy. Like our feelings are valid. The problem is the expectation's impossible, so we're never going to be able to have that expectation met, or rarely going to be able to have that expectation met, and then we stay frustrated. What can we do? Adjust the expectations, help them to be more realistic. Age definitely will do that. The older you get, the more you're like, yeah, that's not possible. It's okay. I'm good. Um, but even so, we set these really high perfectionistic expectations on ourselves. It's not possible. So adjust those expectations. I also heard another quote just a few weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to be able to share this one. There's unspoken expectations. I might have an expectation of a coworker, of my boss, of my partner, of my children. But if I don't share that with them, it is unspoken expectations. So we're expecting them to meet this expectation that they know nothing about. Um, they are premeditated resentments. And I was like, whoa, that was deep. So if I have this expectation of my husband, I never even tell him what the expectation is. And then I am disappointed because he didn't meet my expectation. That's a premeditated resentment. I am setting him up for me to be resentful and he has no idea. You know, my husband doesn't remember things. That's okay. That's just not how his brain is wired. So I, at first, when we were first married, had these unspoken expectations. Oh, what's he going to do special for my birthday? He didn't even remember it was my birthday. Not because he didn't love me. He doesn't remember anyone's birthday. That. So now I say, hey, my birthday's coming up, and I will say I would like to be able to go out to dinner. How about you surprise me? I will say what my expectations are, and that makes it possibly to be met. So expectations are huge. So really taking some time to clarify and look through what are my expectations. And you can even Google like expectations questions for couples. It's very interesting to see how we're like, oh, I never really thought about my thinking. Then there's logistics. Be picky about your schedule. Simplify wherever you can. Plan for the how it works. Plan for how it will work for your specific needs. Um, that is so valuable because logistically, having some sort of plan is going to help us. But I feel like in the United States, especially, there's too many good things. So we are doing all these amazing, busy things. I've got a counseling client I'm working with right now that her child's in everything. I mean, in dance and sports and all this stuff, and she is stressed out. And I'm like, she's in too many good things. Logistically, that's not sustainable. Um, let's see. Oh, I have a great comment. I agree and have changed my expectations over the years and have found so much more joy. Yeah, just changing the expectation brings you joy. Support, connect with your village, know where you can actually find helpful support. That is one thing I love about Oklahoma Family Network. The whole thing is supporting families. Oh, you have this need. Let me connect you with another family who's in a similar situation, and you guys can really partner up and mentor with each other. And it doesn't mean you have to have a huge community of helpers. Find the ones that really value. I used to think that, people who had tons of friends, that was better for them. Hey, if you have a few really good supportive friends, that's okay. It's not the volume, it's that quality. And reach out and ask for help. We're not supposed to do these things on our own. And what we already talked about the mindfulness and then the joy. Choose things that bring you joy. Even the cleaning system, the Marie Como, I forget her name. The one that it's like you're purging your house and you literally pick up every item of clothing. Does this bring me joy? If it doesn't bring you joy, set it aside. Because how much stuff do we hold on to? Marie Kondo, thank you so much. That is not a book that I have read yet. It is on my summer list though, when I'm sitting by the pool with my daughter who can swim that I don't have to watch anymore. It's a glorious stage of life. And this is a big one. That word should, as far as I'm concerned, is a cuss word. If you catch yourself saying should, I coulda, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, put some money in a curse jar. Start saving money for as many times as we say should. Should is a bad word. Should is partners with shame. Well, I should want to do this and I should do that. Says who? Who says you should? I heard a really interesting expectation. It was in a therapist blog. I follow some therapist blogs on Instagram and TikTok, and on Facebook. And in one of the blogs, one of the clients was just so upset and came to the therapist because she was so depressed. She just didn't have the energy to even run the dishes. I just can't run the dishes. So I feel terrible. I just don't do the dishes because I don't have the energy to wash them before I put them in the dishwasher. And he said, well, who said you have to rinse them before you in the dishwasher? She goes, well, I need to get the stuff off. And he's like, what if you put your dishes in the dishwasher and ran it twice? She's like, I can't do that. And he said, who said you can't do that? She was legitimately really struggling with depression. So rerun the dishwasher twice. If you need to run it 3 times, okay. We make a lot of really weird rules for ourselves that steal our joy. So these are things that I would love us to share for a little bit. So in the area of expectations or logistics, like tips for planning or prevention or support, a favorite book or resource that has really helped you, or a blog that's really helped you. Mindfulness, do you have a favorite calm down strategy? Joy, what are some of the things that bring you joy? This is where, in our small community that we have here tonight of 10 people, what things can you share with us that you think that would be really helpful? Because I always love to get ideas and write things down. Do you have a favorite blog? Do you have a favorite, organizational tip? Anything. I would love for you to share with the group. Share our collective wisdom.
I have something to share.
Okay.
This
Thanks,
is,
Deborah.
and I recently figured out I could give myself permission. I decided that it's okay if I am late to Zumba class. I can still go because I was not going because I'm very timely and I hate being late. And so I was skipping it. And I finally said, it's okay. You can be late.
Wow. Just a simple adjustment of an expectation. Now, how much joy has that brought you?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's okay if I'm 10 minutes late or 5 minutes late or whatever. They don't care. I
Yeah.
still am in the same place. And um, it really makes a difference in having given myself it's okay if I don't do the dishes tonight.
Mhm.
I can do them at 6 o'clock in the morning when I get up, or 4 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter. It's okay. And having the ability to give myself permission has made a huge difference.
And it's, sometimes I look back and I think, oh my gosh, how many decades, not just years, decades did we waste with putting these unrealistic expectations? Now, one thing too that we often worry about is what are they going to think? If I'm late, is someone going to be judging me? Here's the reality. Yes, some people are going to be judging us. Can I control that? No. And really, it only matters to me if I let it matter to me. Because I'll be
Exactly.
honest, the people who are judging me for being late, I kind of almost feel pity for them because they're stuck in this swirl of unrealistic expectations. And so, in order to feel better about myself, I have to kind of put someone else down. Well, at least I'm on time, and that what a vicious cycle they're trapped in. I've really found that I can respond to a lot of people who are kind of judgmental. I can respond with empathy because that's not a really fun place to be.
No.
Yeah. You know, it makes you feel superior, but you really don't feel good on the inside. Music, playlists can bring energy and joy. Music can bring peace, calm to your body, your mind, and soul. It's so funny you say that because, Tammy, that was on my Christmas wish list. My sister, one of the things I asked my oldest son went to live in Maine with my sister. He actually lived in their friend's RV in my sister's driveway while he was waiting 3.5 months during COVID for his job to start because it delayed the start of his job. So he had a job in Dallas waiting, but they had to wait till they got all these people off furlough. So he's like, well, I don't want to stay in Tulsa. Might as well go to Maine. So my sister, I said, what's one thing you loved about there? He goes, she always had music in the house. So she had just a wireless sound bar. And she'd always have something playing, sometimes loud, sometimes not. But he's like, I just loved that, just the feeling, the energy, and he actually discovered several bands because of the things. Hey, what's that song? She's like, oh yeah, that's Mount Joy. I love them. So I asked for that for Christmas, and it's so weird, like just putting it on my little Pandora and having my little playlist. It makes the whole house feel different with the music. And then someone else wrote, I love a good book. I go to the library and check out a few books to read, all fluff, rom-coms, mysteries, stuff that makes me laugh out loud. I'm a total Kindle freak, Charlotte. Total Kindle freak. And yeah, it's just a nice escape. Love it. Anything else that you guys would share? Your collective wisdom. And this is one thing I do love too, is when Erin sends out the email with stuff, if you think of stuff in the meantime, send it back to her and then she'll send it to all of us. She's awesome about that, about sharing resources and things like that. But I will say, when it comes to the mindfulness, I'm really excited about that Spiral Up app. In that I've already used it a couple of times since my training yesterday, just to be like, oh, what does this feel like? And I used it with one of my students at school today who came in and she was really upset. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to ask these prompting questions, and just worked her way up to where when she left, she really did feel lighter and felt like empowered. Um, but these are things that can slowly but surely change over time. And then it brings us joy. Now, with mindfulness, also remember it doesn't have to be this amazing, huge, long regimen. It can only take a minute. So here's a 1 minute success story. My sister's husband, he is in the Tulsa area. There's a really large organization called Family and Children's Services. It's a community mental health agency, has just such a depth and breadth of resources. But it's like, it's pretty big. It's a lot of moving parts. Well, he actually is he's some sort of director, not like the head person, but a major player in one of those organizations in the New Hampshire area. So it's a lot of stress and dealing with mental health clients and drug and alcohol addiction and community resources. There's a lot of stress. And so he would always, once he went from being a therapist to being more in this director position with more responsibility and stress, he's always telling his clients, okay, do your grounding, do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's 5 things you can hear, 4 things you can smell, 3 things you can taste, 2 things you can touch, 1 thing you can see, use your senses. He would tell them to do that, but he wasn't doing that. And he really had just noticed an increase in his stress, and he's very in tune with his body. So he's like, you know what, I'm just going to do a 1 minute thing. So he would set his watch to beep every hour on the hour, from the hour before he went to work, all during his workday, in the hour on the way home from work. So every hour he'd hear the beep, beep, just a little buzz on his watch. And he would literally do just a take 5. He would find 1 thing he could see, 1 thing he could hear, 1 thing he could smell, 1 thing he could taste, 1 thing he could touch, just in that moment. And what that did is it forced his brain out of all the simultaneous thoughts, and just right here, right now, in this moment, in the next 30 seconds, he'd bring his brain back. And he said within 3 days, he felt like a totally different person. And okay, so 10 hours, the watch is beeping. So 10 to 13 minutes a day. And he noticed that much difference. I mean, a 30-second investment every hour, that little things like make a big difference. I'm also going to email you. There's a really cool thing. Build mindfulness into your family schedule. Even mindful chewing. All right, guys, we're going to take 20 bites of our food before we swallow it. Mindful moments right when you wake up. But that mindfulness, it retrains our stressed out brains, because our brains, there's 5 kind of levels of stress. There's a level 5, totally overwhelmed, a level 4, very stressed, a level 3, moderate stress, a level 2, some stress, a level 1, not feeling stressed. If we're hanging out in levels 3, 4, or 5, our brain is not working well. We're kind of shut down. If we're hanging out in 4 and 5, we stay shut down. So we have to retrain our stress out brains, because then our resting brain state it never gets back to 1 if we're constantly in 3, 4, and 5. So that becomes our new normal. We're literally never out of kind of fight or flight mode. So working in that mindfulness to retrain the brain can make a huge difference in our lives. So areas to pay attention, just a little reminder. Where are you spending time in your circle? If you are finding yourself starting to worry, ask yourself the question, hey, is this in my control? Is this in my influence? Or is this in that area of stuff that impacts me, but I don't have control over? Where am I going to spend my time? What am I going to talk about? Change those attitudes and focus, and really work on increasing your influence. Sometimes we can take the opposite attack and say, oh, out of my control, nothing I can do about it. And sometimes we give up our power for influence. You know, middle schoolers out of my control, nothing I can do about it. Well, there is some influence that you can still have with your middle schooler, your communication stuff, your consistency in your parenting, you know, what kind of times you spaces can you create for connection? How can you help with friendship stuff and having people over, you know, little things like that. You can have some influence. So don't give away all your power and just throw your hands up. You know, and this is what I see sometimes when a teacher gets really stressed out at school. Oh, just forget it. I can't do anything about this kiddo. Yeah, that's a challenging kiddo. There's still something we can do. One little thing. You can't control all the things. What's one area you can influence? As far as making adjustments, adjust those expectations, set realistic schedules, and really build that support. So if you haven't connected to some support networks or to Oklahoma Family Network, that could be a great resource for you. And really work in those mindful moments. I know Thursdays is going to start to go on my calendar, and I might have some third and fourth grade girls in there with me. I think that will be a very coveted group. I'll probably have to find a bigger room than my office. Um, Now remember what you can't control. You can't control anyone else, but I can control myself. I can control my actions. I can control how I treat others, my boundaries, my choices, and my efforts. I can control my thoughts, my values, and my attitude, how I treat myself and how I react. No matter what someone else does to me, I can choose my reaction. These are the things, if I'm staying focused here and making my adjustments and growing and changing, that's where I'm going to find my joy. Which leads us back to that serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So stay in your circle. And I'll give you a little visual reminder. One wonderful thing that people love to use to decorate are wreaths. We have wreaths on the door, Christmas wreaths and spring wreaths and, you know, all sorts of different stuff. So when you see a wreath in the store or when you're going into Home Goods and being tempted to spend too much money, think to myself, all right, where am I? Am I staying in my circle? How am I doing with that? Am I staying in my circle? Let that be a visual reminder to you to reset in our focus, because it's easy to do that for a little while and then get sidetracked. Stay in that circle and you will find so much more peace and joy and contentment for sure. So, and then next month, Erin, you were right. We are going to be talking about trauma and the impact on anger and feelings, especially when it comes to kiddos, in next month's session.